Maybe you've experienced this frustration. You're trying to help solve a problem, but the airline representative won't listen to you. In this case, you know where your missing suitcase is located. Instead of thanking you for the information, the response you get is, "Nope, you're wrong. Don't call us. We'll call you." Welcome to Airline Travel Unpacked, where an industry veteran talks about the inner workings of the airline industry. Shows are written with the customer in mind. I'll talk about news items and share my perspective on the procedures and the policies that impact you.
The walkway is empty. Please, watch your step.
In July of 2023, Sandra Schuster and her daughter flew from Baltimore to Denver with a layover in Chicago. Sandra's daughter Ruby was playing in a lacrosse tournament, and they were worried about the sporting equipment arriving with them and had decided to place an AirTag in the bag. When they arrived in Denver, they found that the bag, which had $2,000 worth of sporting equipment, hadn't arrived. The United Airlines representatives told her that the bag would arrive from Chicago on the next flight. That didn't happen. United then advised that the bag was still in Baltimore and would arrive later that day. The AirTag showed that the bag was in Chicago. Sandra asked the United representatives to contact the O'Hare Airport and retrieve the bag. The reps said that they were not allowed to do that. Sandra was told that just because the AirTag was in Chicago didn't mean that the bag was there too. Eventually, she was told to begin the process for settlement and that the bag might still show up later. Ruby was comfortable using her lacrosse gear and wanted it back. She didn't want a settlement. The representatives again said that they were not allowed to call the O'Hare Airport. Finally, a supervisor agreed to call, but then said that no one answered the phone. Sandra decided to take things into her own hands and booked a ticket to Chicago using her frequent flyer miles. Upon arrival, she says that it took only 30 seconds to find her daughter's bag. She also discovered the problem. The ticket agent in Baltimore had put someone else's tag on the bag with Chicago marked as the destination. She asked United to reimburse her for the trip, but after 3 days hadn't heard back from them. CNN reached out to United Airlines, and within 24 hours, the mileage used for the ticket was redeposited back into Sandra's account. In the CNN article, she is quoted as saying, "United seems to be very siloed. They don't have a way where these people can talk to each other and figure it out quickly. I understand outsourcing, but there are real inefficiencies here."
Unattended baggage is subject to search, inspection, damage, and removal.
In November of 2022, Paul Clifford and his wife were traveling internationally and were concerned about their luggage getting lost. They decided to purchase an AirTag and place it in their suitcase. Their outbound trip was fine, and their luggage arrived with them. However, when they arrived back home in Canada, they saw that their bag was still back in Mexico City. They reported the missing bag and were reassured by Air Canada representatives that their bag would be returned to them soon. About 2 weeks later, the couple checked their Apple phone and saw that the suitcase was now located in Madrid, Spain. The couple finally reached out to the local media and shared their story. The airline advised the media outlet that they were going to compensate the couple for their lost luggage.
Crew 6 customers welcome aboard. Flight 775 to the main boarding lane. 126, welcome aboard.
In May of 2024, a lady named Ani Grace flew from Dallas to Burbank on American Airlines. Due to a cancellation, she had been moved to a different flight. Her bag didn't arrive with her. 5 days later, a third-party courier service told her that they would be delivering the bag to her. It didn't arrive. She checked the status of the AirTag and saw that it was near Sunset Boulevard and Western Avenue. She decided to go find the bag herself and located it at a nearby intersection. She didn't find her bag, but found some of her belongings in a shopping cart at a homeless encampment. She claims that she saw dozens of suitcases strewn around the area, along with strollers and bicycles with airline bag tags still attached. Unfortunately, she says that she was not able to locate a medical kit that she estimates was worth close to $6,000. At the time of the story, the airline had offered her $1,700 in compensation.
Michael 642, descend to maintain 4,000. Descend to maintain 4,000, Mexico 642.
Valerie Zabala was traveling on United Airlines in December of 2022 when her bag didn't arrive with her in Washington, D.C. The bag was located by the airline and was supposed to be delivered by a third-party courier service. According to the story, the AirTag indicated that the bag had been at an apartment complex for a few days. To her surprise, she saw that the bag had left the complex and gone to a local McDonald's. The next day, it journeyed to a shopping center 16 miles away before returning to the apartment complex. She went to the apartment complex and looked around outside, but didn't find her bag. She says that a short while later, she received a message from the courier, and he claimed that he had been given the wrong delivery address and had gone back and picked the bag up. She received her bag and no items were missing. United gave her 10,000 miles and advised her that they were investigating the issue.
1097 Tango Atlanta approach standby. TrueTech 348, say again, you're 3143 to Rado.
In November of 2024, the New York Post ran a story about Dan Adams. Dan and his partner had checked in 4 bags for the trip to Barcelona on United Airlines. 3 of the 4 bags came up on the baggage carousel. His AirTag showed that the 4th bag was nearby. It appeared to be on the other side of the wall next to where they were standing in the baggage claim. He showed the airline representative, and she replied that the bag was not there. Dan and his partner were jet-lagged and wanted to get to their hotel. They decided to accept the representative's assurances that the bag would turn up later and left the airport. A short while later, Dan's trackers showed that the bag had left the airport and was moving out of the city. The story doesn't mention if the bag was ever recovered.
For 3615 North Tower, wind 3306, my 22 left, clear to land. Just left, well, we get this 615. Jazz 944, just bring it back to final approach speed, please. Back to final, Jazz 944.
Let's recap these stories and see what we can learn from their experiences. I'll address specifics for each case and tie it together at the end with good general advice. There's also big changes on the way that will benefit consumers. Sandra and Ruby and the lacrosse equipment in Chicago. Sandra should have verified that the bag had the correct tag when she was checking in. Every airline teaches their ticket agents to show the customer the bag tag and to read out the final destination. Obviously, some agents don't do that. It's okay for you to slow them down and inspect the bag tag. The tags usually have your name, confirmation code, and the 3-letter code for your destination. Verify the 3-letter code for accuracy. For example, they can't just say Chicago because there are 2 airports there. The 3-letter code for Midway is MDW, and O'Hare is ORD, and it matters that it's correct. If Sandra could have a do-over, then the best approach would have been to get a supervisor involved immediately. Escalation to a supervisor applies in all of these scenarios, so I'll address that in just a bit. The Cliffers are the couple that flew from Mexico to Canada, and somehow the AirTag showed that their bag wound up in Spain 2 weeks later. Other than the missing bag, the other issue is that the airline didn't follow their own policy and procedures. Let's talk about that policy for Air Canada. There are 2 components for the search process for delayed bags. There is an initial search and also a long-term search. Each airline decides how many days are spent on each part of the process. The initial search is usually handled by the airport staff during the first 4 to 5 days. After the initial time frame, the delayed bag file is assigned to a different team for the longer-term search. Looking at the Air Canada website, they should have contacted the Cliffers on the 5th day after arrival and told them what to expect for the remainder of the process. According to the story, that didn't happen. The crazy part of this story is that the AirTag wound up in Spain. There's something called positive bag match, which means that a suitcase can only travel on an international flight if the passenger is confirmed to be on board the plane. So here's what I'm wondering. Did the suitcase go to Spain without the passenger? Did the AirTag fall out of the bag and somehow wind up in Spain? Did somebody else travel with their suitcase and take it to Spain? All interesting questions for which we'll never get answers for. Bags that were with the delivery couriers. The situation where the bag was found at the homeless encampment seems like theft. My guess is that the bag was either stolen from the airline or from the courier service and wound up in the hands of someone hanging out near Sunset Boulevard. For the one where the bag was at an apartment complex for a couple of days and then cruised around the suburbs, that one is odd. The driver could have been telling the truth about being sent to the wrong delivery address. Another possibility is that the courier was trying to hide the fact that they're really bad at their job and just hadn't got around to making the delivery. There have been news stories over the years where mailmen and package delivery drivers resorted to hiding letters and boxes because they couldn't keep up with the workload. And, if we want to be cynical, we could assume that they intended to steal the bag, but were being hounded by the airline and did the right thing and delivered the bag. As far as I know, airlines have always used third-party companies for the courier service. I've never seen the contract terms between the airline and the courier services. When it comes to bags that permanently disappear, my guess is that the liability and compensation from the courier matches what airlines offer to their customers. How delivery works is that the courier service swings by the airport and picks up a bunch of suitcases from the different airlines that they're contracted with. The delivery addresses can be all over the city, so they plan their deliveries based on the most efficient route. So keep that in mind because you could see your AirTag going all over the city, and in that case, it's perfectly normal. The contracts state that the courier service must deliver the bag to the passenger within a specific time frame, which is usually 4 to 6 hours from the time they left the airport. Make sure to ask the airline what the maximum delivery time is for the courier service. If the bag is with the courier and it doesn't get to you within the required time frame, then you need to escalate with a supervisor at the airline immediately. Ask for the name of the courier service. At this point, it's acceptable to threaten to file a complaint with the DOT against the airline and the courier. Here's why. The U.S. government tracks the number of complaints about airlines and makes that information available to the public. But they don't do that for the courier services. Complaints that include both the airline and the courier service will be a factor when it comes time for the airline to renew the contract with the delivery company. If you aren't satisfied with the results, then you can move beyond threats and file an official complaint with the DOT.
On behalf of your entire flight crew, especially your flight attendants, it's been our pleasure having you on board with us.
General advice. In the last example, I mentioned escalating to a supervisor. If your AirTag is showing the location of your bag and the airport representative is ignoring that information, then you should consider escalating to an airport supervisor immediately. If it's possible, the best course of action is to remain at the airport until you've spoken with a supervisor in person. Once you leave the airport, you'll be dealing with representatives over the phone or through text messages or email, and that isn't as effective. Ask the representative and the supervisor to add comments to your file stating that you have an air tracker that shows the location of your bag. The next piece of advice is to take screenshots of the bag location so that you have evidence of where it might be located and evidence of it moving around. Lastly, a couple of stories I shared mentioned that expensive items were lost along with the suitcase. Please remember this advice. If something is expensive or important, then it needs to be with you as a personal item underneath the seat in front of you or in your carry-on bag. If you read the airline terms of service, known as a contract of carriage, you'll see that they specifically state that they're not liable for expensive or high-value items in your checked bags. And generally speaking, the maximum that they're required to pay out is $3,800 for flights within the U.S. So the $6,000 medical kit was probably not reimbursed for the full value. I want to mention a couple of things for the sake of fairness. No one is writing stories about all of the times that the airline representatives believed the customer and used the AirTag information to successfully resolve the situation. I'm 100% sure that happens on a regular basis. I also want to point out that United is mentioned most in these examples I shared, but I assure you that this is a problem with all airlines. Lastly, we'll wrap up with the good news. And the good news is that Apple is partnering with Delta, United, and 13 foreign airlines. Beginning in 2025, it'll be possible to use the Share Item Location feature and provide your air tracker information to the airline. This is huge. Kudos to Apple for their innovation, and we should commend the participating airlines for doing this. It's a win for the customer, an example of great customer service. I expect more airlines will be partnering with Apple in the future. That's all I've got. Thanks for listening.